What's up guys and welcome back to the channel yet again. In previous videos, I talked about how one of the more interesting things about Star Wars that I found recently is Dave Filoni's comments and thoughts on the universe as a whole. Recently in the Mandalorian documentary, he talked about why the Duel of Fates in The Phantom Menace is known as the Duel of Fates, and how Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan, and Maul are literally fighting for the fate of this child in Anakin Skywalker, and how Qui-Gon Jinn represents the perfect father figure that Anakin could have, and his ultimate death in the end seals Anakin's fate. In researching other comments that Dave Filoni has made about the Star Wars universe, I came across one of the most interesting. But first, let's lay a little bit of groundwork and talk about the most powerful character in all of Star Wars canon currently. I've explained it like this before in videos, talking about the power levels of an individual like Anakin or Palpatine, and I always mention them as the most powerful non-entity characters. But today we're gonna take a look at a literal Star Wars entity. When I say entities, I mean creatures in Star Wars such as the Bendu. And now today, the most powerful of all of them, the Force Priestesses. The Force Priestesses are actually a canon creation, and were not mentioned previously in Star Wars legend, appearing in the 6th season of Star Wars The Clone Wars. In the 6th season, it is revealed that the Force Priestesses were actually sought out years earlier by Qui-Gon Jinn, as in the Clone Wars, Yoda seeks them out now. The Priestesses explain that Qui-Gon Jinn learned the ability to return beyond death by the Force Priestesses, and that they are responsible for teaching him this ability, although Qui-Gon Jinn would never fully master it, which is why he only appears as a voice and not as a fully formed Force ghost. Yoda, though, again in the 6th season of the Clone Wars, is able to master the ability, later teaching it to Obi-Wan Kenobi with the help of Qui-Gon Jinn, which is how Yoda as well as Obi-Wan are able to return as Force ghosts, with Yoda learning the ability directly from the Force Priestesses. Concerning the Force Priestesses, we don't know much, only that the Priestesses were a representation of the connection between the living Force and the cosmic Force, as experienced by living beings, explaining that the cosmic Force is what controls the entire aspect of the Star Wars universe, and the living Force is the part of the Force that beings such as the Jedi and Sith can tap into, revealing that the Force Priestesses have access to a version of the Force that again the Jedi and the Sith do not, going a long way to explain their power. The Force Priestesses could be found existing within the wellspring of life, or the birthplace and creation of the midichlorian, in a sense the birthplace of the living Force itself. As a side note, the living Force and cosmic Force were described as a sort of retcon, after the massive backlash of the midichlorians that was introduced in The Phantom Menace. The fact that these little microscopic organisms controlled how powerful one was within the Force. The Force Priestesses were explained in a way to explain that the cosmic Force and the living Force were separate, and that the midichlorians were not a part of the cosmic Force, but again, the living Force, leading into the idea that just because you have a bunch of midichlorians does not mean that you're inherently gifted with the cosmic Force, just the living Force. This is the part of Star Wars that gets very, very confusing and complex. The 5 priestesses were a form of shapeshifters and could mutate their form to manifest as serenity, joy, anger, confusion, and sadness, all the different aspects and emotions within the Force itself. As stated, Jedi Master Yoda encountered the Force Priestesses during the Clone Wars, and they knew the secret to transforming into a Force spirit, and would later teach the Grand Master. It is believed that another form of the Force Priestesses is the Shaman of the Wills, who Qui-Gon Jinn learned the ability from. The Shaman of the Wills taught Jinn the path of retaining one's consciousness after death, and that it required absolute selflessness. The Shaman of the Wills traces its origins to the early drafts of A New Hope, which George Lucas stated was a story told in the Journal of the Wills. The Shaman of the Wills was first specifically mentioned in the screenplay for Revenge of the Sith, in a now deleted scene that featured the spirit of Qui-Gon Jinn communing with Yoda. In the scene, which was never completed, Qui-Gon stated that the eternal consciousness had been accomplished by a Shaman of the Wills. A cut line from a later scene also had Yoda saying that the path to eternal consciousness was a secret of the ancient order of the Wills. Again, it is my personal theory that this Shaman of the Wills is an alternate form of the Force Priestesses. Now, let's get into Dave Filoni's comments on the Force Priestesses, and something interesting about their power, as well as the very state of the Priestesses themselves. In an interview, Dave Filoni indicated that the Force Priestesses may be one being who became 5 over a long period of time, saying, "The way I reconciled that being is actually as one being. It's one ancient being separated over time that for our perception could be able to see her. She is these many different iconic things presented to us, but she died a long time ago. She is conscious in the Force, and she has a limited ability to manifest herself," which is what we see here. It is a widely believed fan theory that the Force priestesses are a literal physical representation of the cosmic force itself, meaning that they are powerful enough to control one full aspect of the entire Force. Now, let's delve a little bit deeper into Star Wars, talking about the Ones, the gods of Mortis. I believe that the Ones, as also seen in Star Wars The Clone Wars in the daughter, the son, and the father, represent the aspect of the living force, therefore why they are mortal and can actually be killed, while on the other hand the Force priestesses, being the wills and the cosmic force, are eternal. It is important to note that the wills, or the priestesses themselves, are Force ghosts. However, they are able to manifest themselves far beyond the powers of that of the Jedi, and that the Jedi are able to accomplish, being described as beings greater than the Force ghosts that Jedi ultimately can achieve. Why this is unknown, but again, the Force priestesses were formerly one being, a being that did in fact live, but also one that became the physical manifestation of the cosmic force itself. Later in an interview, Dave Filoni did say that he did not know what the Force priestesses were in a previous life, and that wasn't really important to the story at all. What is important is what the Force priestesses represent now, which I find to be exceptionally interesting. The fact that even one of the creator of the Force priestesses and the wills had no idea what they were in a previous life, meaning that currently there is no definitive answer to what the wills were in life. I also want to point out that despite the wills and the priestesses being the most powerful characters in all of Star Wars canon, this little matters, as it is not their job to interfere with galactic-wide events, which is why you would never see the Force priestesses battle somebody like Palpatine or Anakin. It is not their job. The job of the priestesses is to record knowledge. The Wills kept a collection of stories called the Journal of the Wills that chronicled the history of the galaxy. A keeper of the Wills was responsible for adding new information into it. One such keeper was told the story of the Skywalker family's exploits during the Clone Wars as well as the Galactic Civil War. This is what George Lucas had to say. "Originally, I was trying to have the story be told by somebody else, an immortal being known as a Will. There was somebody watching this whole story and recording it, somebody probably wiser than the mortal characters and players in the actual events. I eventually dropped this idea, and the concepts behind the Wills turned into the Force. But the Wills became a part of this massive amount of notes, quotes, background information that I used for the scripts. The stories were actually taken from the Journal of the Wills. It wasn't until the Clone Wars, though, that Dave Filoni and George Lucas decided to make the Force priestesses and the Wills one, simply giving them a different name. Anyway, my friends, what are your guys' thoughts on this and the most powerful character in all of Star Wars explored? The 5 Force priestesses, or the 1 Force priestess, or the Wills? Very confusing, but very interesting nonetheless. Did you know all of this information behind the Force priestesses? And what are your thoughts on this character and its conception? If you guys enjoy more in-depth videos like this, be sure to hit that like button, as that's basically what tells me you guys want to see more. As always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.